Welcome to the Accomplished Brain Podcast, where we share our passion, knowledge, and experience about the brain and health.
Like to review, falling asleep is very important. And then staying asleep, the other things I recognize too is blood sugar too. Sometimes a trick that I've used is a little protein and fat to stabilize your blood sugar. So again, if blood sugar levels sometimes drop a little too much, that could cause an increase in blood sugar, and that can increase in norepinephrine and epinephrine, and that can cause an arousal effect as well. So stabilizing blood sugar, so like getting protein, getting like a little snack, and saying getting a piece of celery and like almond butter, that has a little protein, or a protein shake with a little almond butter in it, that could help allowing you to stay asleep. So again, managing blood sugar, that's one. Cortisol levels, two. Acetylcholine, making sure that neurotransmitter, making sure GABA. So a lot of your neurotransmitters, a lot of your hormones, like I said before, some of the tricks with GABA, we have them do some of the brain vestibular work before we go to bed. Obviously too, to further calm the system, meditation and breathing exercises, meditation, activate that parasympathetic system to try to drive more GABA. That GABA inhibits the orexin and histamine, making sure you're not eating foods that have your allergic reaction. Then you can fall asleep, right? And then making sure you got blood sugar that you could stay asleep. Then making sure that your eye movements and saccades are doing really well, your frontal lobe activation, making sure that the cortisol is the amount of cortisol and the rhythm is important, to make sure also your memory centers and your hippocampus and your acetylcholine is really good, so you can get into that REM sleep. And then waking up, arousal is your orexin and your dopamine, right? So making sure the dopaminergic activating system, so making sure that your dopamine levels are good, making sure that your acetylcholine, because acetylcholine not only is for the REM, but is also for the arousal as well. Because REM is very, very close. And I'm sure people have had this experience that all of a sudden you got into some deep sleep and you felt like so good, like you got into deep sleep and you're like, your dream feels so real. And then all of a sudden, like, boom, you just like wake up, because that acetylcholine is there for memory, is there for the REM sleep, and is there for that first level to help you arouse yourself and get up. That's why there's a lot of brain activity during the REM sleep.
Yeah, that's great. And I just to add on to that, Andrew, with acetylcholine, so some people like to talk about acetylcholine almost like a lubricator for the brain. When you talk about brain fog, it just helps us get through our thoughts a lot faster. So again, the production of that is also very important.
Yeah. So I thought this was, Jeff, and I wanted to say this was a really, really good webinar. I think a good podcast. I think something to remind us, and I'll say this on the podcast, is I'll try to bring up a document on tryptophan a little bit, because we talked about that. So again, we talked about cortisol, we talked about the hippocampus, the memory centers, acetylcholine, we talked about GABA, we talked about the autonomic nervous system, the anterior, we talked about that has effect on the anterior part of the hypothalamus, has an effect on the parasympathetic, which calms us down. The posterior and lateral hypothalamus has an effect on the sympathetic nervous system, which drives us, arouses us, gets us going. We talked about when we get into we talked about blood sugar helps us, the management of blood sugar to stay asleep. We talked about also making sure you don't have sleep apnea, that helps you with the CPAP, with oxygen levels to stay asleep. We talked about sleep apnea, that you can have obstruction, which is the most common, which is the circumference of, most of the time, the increase of weight in the circumference of your neck. We talked about the neuro component. There is a neural part of sleep apnea that is the pontomedullary system of the brainstem. So we talked about a lot of different things. We talked about getting into REM sleep has to deal with your eye movements and looking at your eye movements, your frontal lobe activation, and acetylcholine. So we really kind of put it all together. Jeff did an incredible job about talking about the brain waves, and the different and the different parts of sleep 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I thought, Jeff did an amazing job. And, we all just want to provide value. If you're a client and has a question, you can always contact Jeff Rose at Rep. If you have a question, you could contact me, Andrew Amigo, at The Accomplished Brain. If you're a practitioner and you want to know more about the work that we're doing, we do offer a course. We have a software now that we're leasing to you guys and the practitioners. If you're a client, you could love to work with Jeff and I, or, we're getting more practitioners involved in the work that we're doing, trying to get our message out there. All we want to do is provide value, great content, great information, and we want to help as many people as we can to improve their health.
Well, thanks so much, Andrew. Today was awesome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on the Accomplished Brain podcast, and we'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time. Thank you, Jeff.